I didn't recognize the red folder when I found it wedged behind the boiler in my basement. It was water damaged at the corners. The metal fasteners were rusted, and the tab had no label, just a torn piece of masking tape with a faded number scribbled in black ink, number 237. I wasn't looking for it. I was down there to fix the humming sound coming from the water tank, but the folder was just sitting there, barely hidden, like it had been waiting. I thought it might belong to the house's previous owner. I bought the place 5 years ago from an elderly man who'd moved to Florida. He'd left behind a lot of junk, old jars, brittle magazines, a broken elliptical, but nothing like this. Out of curiosity, I opened it. Inside were 6 sheets of paper, carefully printed, some typed, some handwritten, but none of them in my handwriting. And yet every single page was about me. I don't mean vaguely, I mean about me. The first page was a form, a custody agreement dated 2011. My name was listed as the father, but I had no children. The second page was a letter addressed to me, no envelope. You weren't supposed to know. I tried to protect him from all this, but time catches up. If you're reading this, I lost control of the plan. Or worse, someone told you. I stopped breathing. I sat on the concrete floor, folder open in my lap, hands shaking, wondering if this was some twisted joke. But it wasn't. Every page just dug the knife deeper. There was a photocopy of a birth certificate, a boy, born in Oregon, 2010. Mother, Evelyn, Carter. Father, Daniel J. Reed. Me. I felt like I was floating outside my own body. This wasn't some scam. This wasn't a prank. I knew that signature. I remembered that handwriting. I remembered how she curled her lowercase y's like tiny fish hooks. She used to do it when writing grocery lists. My ex-wife. 15 years ago, we divorced and never spoke again. She swore she was leaving because she had nothing left to give, that she needed to start over and not be anyone's anything anymore. I believed her. I let her go. But this folder said otherwise. There were notes in the margins on some pages, mentions of someone named S, mentions of payments, mentions of secrecy agreements, and an unsigned draft of a private adoption release with my name removed. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was confused, hollow. I sat there for maybe an hour, rereading every line until they blurred into meaningless squiggles. How did this end up in my house? Why was it hidden? And why now? I didn't sleep that night. I left the folder on the kitchen table, staring at it like it might change. The next morning, I drove 2 hours to my brother Julian's place. He used to be close to Evelyn, closer than I ever liked, honestly, but he knew things. He always did. When he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't ask what was wrong. He just said, "You found it." And that's when everything really started to unravel. Julian didn't invite me in right away. He stood in the doorway with that stiff look he gets when he's calculating something, usually whether to lie or to confess. I held the red folder under my arm like a weapon, and when I didn't speak, he finally stepped aside. His place hadn't changed since the last time I visited 5 years ago. The same worn leather chair he always called his throne. The same half-finished bottle of rye on the counter. The same dusty photo of our parents before Dad vanished. I set the folder down on the coffee table, and he didn't even look at it. He just exhaled slowly and dropped into the armchair, rubbing his temples. "You weren't supposed to see that," he muttered. "Now, what is that? Or where did you find it?" Just straight into acknowledgement, like we were continuing a conversation from years ago that I didn't remember starting. I didn't sit. I couldn't. My legs were too stiff, my pulse crawling up into my throat. "Why the hell is my name on a custody agreement for a kid I never met?" I asked. "Why was this hidden in my house? Why does Evelyn say I'm a father?" My voice cracked on that last word like I hadn't earned the right to say it. Julian didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured himself a glass of whatever he was drinking and took a long, regret-soaked sip. "Because you were," he said finally, "but you weren't supposed to be." That made no sense. I asked again, slower this time, if he was messing with me, if this was some elaborate prank, some paperwork from a custody case he handed for someone else. But deep down, I knew the signature was mine. The timelines matched. Evelyn and I had divorced in 2010. The boy in the birth certificate was born 8 months later. It lined up too perfectly. She was pregnant, I said out loud, barely able to hear myself. She didn't tell me. Julian nodded. She wanted to, but someone else convinced her not to. I snapped, not in a violent way, but in that imploding, chest-collapsing way that happens when everything you believed about your own life turns out to be hollow. Who? I asked. Who convinced her? He hesitated. Then he looked up and met my eyes for the first time since I walked in. "You're not going to like it," he said. "It wasn't Mark or any of those guys you thought she was seeing." And that's when he dropped the first twist, like a brick. It was Mom. I blinked. "Mom?" I repeated like it was a foreign word. "Our mom?" He nodded, slow and steady, like he was bracing for impact. "She found out. She told Evelyn if she loved you, she'd leave and raise the child without you. Said you weren't ready. Said you'd ruin the kid's life the way Dad ruined ours. She told Evelyn she'd cut her off completely. No support, no help, unless she disappeared." I felt like the air had been punched out of me. I dropped onto the couch without realizing it. All this time, I thought my mother just hated Evelyn. I never knew how deep it went. Never knew she'd get involved like that. "So, Evelyn left to protect me?" I asked, even though the question felt like a betrayal of itself. Julian didn't answer. Instead, he pulled open the folder again, flipped to a folded page near the back. A handwritten note, a second letter, never sent. "I didn't want to do this, Daniel. I waited in the car outside your building for hours. I thought maybe I'd run up the stairs and tell you everything, but then I remembered what your mother said about cycles, about damage, about history. Maybe she was right. Maybe love isn't enough. I wish it were." I didn't cry. Not then. I think I was too angry, too stunned, too old to be hearing this for the first time from my younger brother, like it was just family gossip. 15 years. 15 years of silence. 15 years of birthdays missed. First words, first steps. A life I wasn't even allowed to know existed. "Where is he now?" I asked. My voice came out dry and metallic. Julian didn't answer right away. Then he said, "That's where things get messy. Evelyn, she's not just here to tell you, she needs help." I looked up. "Help with what?" He took another drink, and this time he didn't look away. "Because the boy, Liam, he's missing." I didn't want to see her again, not after everything Julian had said, not after the folder, not after learning my mother, of all people, had played puppet master with my life behind my back. But Evelyn insisted. Julian said she was the one who placed the folder in the basement, that she needed me to see it, but only now. There was a reason I waited, he told me. She'll explain it better than I can. That didn't make me feel any better. Nothing could, honestly. For 3 days, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep without waking up mid-dream, convinced I'd heard a child's voice in the hallway calling out my name. I lived alone. There were no voices. But the ghost of a son I never met had suddenly moved into every corner of my brain. We met at an old park on the outskirts of town, not in public view, not too secluded either. Evelyn's idea, always strategic, always 5 steps ahead. She looked older, not in a bad way, just different, worn down, like life had dragged her through a few more storms than it warned her about. But she still had those calculating eyes, the ones that used to freeze me mid-argument. When she sat down across from me at the weathered picnic bench, she didn't waste time. She placed her phone on the table, screen down, and said, "I know you have questions, but I need you to listen first." I wanted to yell, I wanted to accuse, but something in her voice, something I hadn't heard since before our marriage died, made me shut up and let her talk. She told me about Liam, about how he was a quiet kid, smart, observant, not the kind of boy who caused trouble. Said he liked to draw maps of imaginary cities. Used to color rivers across the hardwood floor using sidewalk chalk. I couldn't picture any of it, and yet I could. She said he always asked why his last name didn't match hers, why there were no baby pictures of her in a hospital bed, why no one ever came to Dad Day at school. And every year it got harder to answer. I told him you died once, she admitted. I told him you left. Then I told him the truth. My mouth went dry. Which one? I asked bitterly. She flinched. The truth that I ran away because I was afraid, and someone helped me be afraid. Your mother didn't lie to me, Daniel. She just painted you like a storm I needed to escape before it hit. And I listened because I loved you and because I was stupid. I didn't know what to say. Every word from her mouth was a match tossed into a room soaked in old memories. Then she dropped the new bombshell. Last summer, Liam started talking to someone online. I monitored it at first. Just a game server. Nothing alarming. But then he got secretive. Started deleting chats, locking his laptop. He said it was just friends, that I was being paranoid. But 3 weeks ago, he vanished. I froze. Vanished. Gone. Backpack missing. No note, no credit card activity, no social media. Just gone. And the police won't do anything because, technically, he's 15 and left voluntarily. They think he's just off the grid for a bit. Her voice cracked on the last word. I hadn't seen Evelyn cry since the week her sister overdosed. She didn't cry for our marriage, not even in court. But now her voice gave out. I asked if she had told the police everything about the strange messages, the conversations Liam had. She nodded. They opened a report, then closed it. No foul play, no trace. I clenched my fists. And now you want my help? After everything? Evelyn reached into her coat and slid a sealed envelope across the bench. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, clearly taken through a long lens. It showed Liam standing on a street corner with a man I'd never seen before. Tall, unshaven, wearing a heavy coat despite summer heat. And here's the part that made my stomach twist into knots. The man had his hand on Liam's shoulder, like a father would, like I never did. I don't know who he is, Evelyn whispered, but Liam called him S. That name again, the same initial Julian had mentioned. I looked up, trying to make sense of the sudden convergence. Why would Liam go with someone like that? Evelyn swallowed. Because I think someone's been feeding him lies for years, and I think it's someone we both used to trust. I felt the blood drain from my face. Who? I asked. Evelyn took a long breath, then said the last name I ever expected to hear. Your brother. I didn't drive straight home after meeting Evelyn. I sat in my truck for nearly 2 hours, just parked in the lot of a closed tire shop, replaying the conversation again and again until my head ached. Every time I thought I'd found solid ground, the floor cracked open beneath me. First the folder, then the kid, now this, that Liam might have been taken or manipulated by someone who shared my blood. Julian, my younger brother, the person who once pulled me out of a frozen river in 7th grade, who cried with me when our dad disappeared, who toasted my wedding with shaking hands and said, "You got the good one, man." What the hell happened to him? I didn't call ahead. I just showed up at his place again. I rang the bell 3 times, then pounded on the door. When he opened it, he looked surprised, but not surprised enough. That's what struck me. Like he'd expected I'd come eventually, just not this soon. "Evelyn," I said. No hello, no small talk, just that. And the color drained from his face. I stepped inside without waiting for permission. "You want to tell me why my ex-wife thinks you're involved with my son's disappearance?" He shut the door slowly behind me, then leaned against it like he needed it to stay upright. "I knew she'd blame me," he muttered. "Of course she would." "That's not an answer, Julian." He stayed quiet. His hands were trembling. That scared me more than anything. My brother always had a way of looking bored, even when things were on fire. But now, he looked cornered. And when he finally spoke, he said something I did not expect. "I never hurt Liam. I never touched him. I would never do that." The way he rushed to say it made me shiver, because I hadn't asked if he hurt Liam. I hadn't said anything about that. But now the thought was planted, and I couldn't get it out. I backed away slightly, like I was realizing just how close to something dark I might be. "Then what did you do?" I demanded. "What's going on?" He sat down on the edge of the couch like he couldn't carry the weight of it anymore. "Liam reached out to me a year ago," he said, "through email. He found my name on some old public record. He wanted to know more about you, about the family. Evelyn had started opening up to him by then, and he had questions. I answered them. I didn't lie, but I didn't tell Evelyn either." I paced. "Why wouldn't you tell her? That's her son." "Because I knew she'd shut it down, and I thought Liam deserved to know." We kept it going, just occasional emails, sometimes calls. I gave him stories, photos. I told him about her dad, about how you used to be before everything changed. He looked up at me. "He liked you, Daniel, even without knowing you. He liked the idea of you." That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. "But who's this man he disappeared with?" I asked. "The guy in the photo? Son?" Julian's jaw tightened. "I don't know. I swear to you, I don't know who that is. But Liam mentioned someone new a few weeks before he vanished. Someone online. Said he was helping him find the truth. Said he had documents, timelines, stuff even I didn't know. I told him to be careful, but you know how kids are. He thought he was being recruited into some spy movie. I thought it was just fantasy." "You think he was groomed?" I asked. Julian nodded slowly. "I think he was targeted, but I don't know why or by who. And if Evelyn's right and someone convinced him to disappear, then we're all being played." That's when I noticed something strange on the coffee table. A stack of old VHS tapes, labeled. One of them had my name on it. I picked it up. "What the hell is this?" Julian froze. "Don't watch those." "Why not?" "They're old therapy recordings from when Mom used to take us to see Dr. Sandler." I narrowed my eyes. "I never saw Dr. Sandler." His face went pale. "You did. You just don't remember." A chill climbed up my spine. "What are you talking about?" Julian stood, grabbed the tape from my hand, and shoved it back in the drawer like it was radioactive. "There are things Mom didn't tell us, things you were made to forget. I didn't want you to find out like this. But if Liam is missing and someone's trying to use the past against us, then maybe it's time you saw what I saw." I stared at him, mouth dry, heart thudding. "What did you see?" I whispered. He looked at me, eyes full of something halfway between terror and guilt. "You." That night, I didn't go home. I sat in my truck outside Julian's house long after midnight, headlights off, engine dead, just listening to the faint hum of crickets and the occasional passing car. The air was damp with the kind of silence that feels heavier than sound. Inside, I could still see the faint flicker of light from his living room window. He hadn't gone to bed either. I knew that kind of insomnia. It's the kind where you don't fear nightmares, you fear remembering. I replayed his last words over and over. "There are things you were made to forget." The kind of line that doesn't come from an argument, it comes from confession. I didn't know what he meant by you, but I knew I couldn't leave without finding out. So, I waited until the house went completely dark. And then I did something I never thought I'd do to my own brother. I went back inside. His back door lock had always been lousy, and I still remembered the little trick with the latch. Inside, the air smelled like whiskey and old pine cleaner. I used my phone flashlight and walked straight to the drawer where he'd hidden the VHS tapes. My name was on 2 of them now that I lived closer. One said, Session 4, Daniel, 1994. The other, Session 7, Daniel and Julian. My hands shook when I picked them up. My childhood was a blur of partial memories. Moving towns, Mom's endless new beginnings, and a father whose name we weren't allowed to say after he left. But therapy. I remembered nothing about that. Nothing. I found an old player in his office closet. He'd labeled it Basement Backup. The cables barely worked, but after a few minutes of static and worrying, the first tape began to play. The screen flickered gray, then cleared to an image of a dimly lit room. Bare walls, 1 chair, a cheap table, and a boy sitting in the corner. My boyish self, maybe 7 years old, pale, silent. There was a woman's voice off camera, steady, calm, clinical. Daniel, can you tell me what you saw at the cabin? My younger self didn't answer right away. Then, in a small voice, I said, he wasn't supposed to come in. My throat tightened. I could hear it, the same tone I used when I was terrified but trying to sound brave. The therapist asked, who wasn't supposed to? And then my younger self whispered, Dad. The tape cracked with static right after that. I sat there frozen, waiting for sound to return. When it did, my mother's voice came through. Not in person, but faintly from behind the camera. Don't push him too much, Claire. He's been through enough. That was her tone, her phrasing, always directing, always controlling the narrative. My younger self spoke again, clearer this time. He said, Julian shouldn't have seen it. I didn't understand. Seen what? The therapist asked, but the tape ended. Just black. No credits, no timestamp. I sat in the dark with the player still humming, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't even realize I was crying until I wiped my face and felt how cold my hands were. The second tape waited on the table like a dare. I hesitated, then slid it in. This one was shorter, maybe 5 minutes long. The same room, both of us there this time, me and Julian. He was crying quietly, while my younger self sat motionless, eyes blank. The therapist's voice again. It's important you both tell the truth. What happened that night wasn't your fault. My brother looked up and said, but she said we had to forget. The therapist asked, who told you that? And in perfect unison, both of us answered, Mom. The tape clicked off. Silence. I felt sick. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the coffee table, the room spinning around me. I didn't know what the cabin was. I didn't know what we'd seen, what Mom had made us bury. But whatever it was, it had scarred 2 boys so badly she'd paid a therapist to erase it. And if she had the power to rewrite the past, what else had she rewritten? My thoughts kept circling back to Liam, to the way Evelyn said someone was feeding him lies, someone who knew timelines and documents. What if the story he was told wasn't new? It was recycled. What if the same hand that erased my childhood was now rewriting his? I grabbed both tapes and the red folder, threw them in a duffel bag, and drove. No destination, just away. I called Evelyn from the road. She didn't answer. I left a message, voice shaking. Don't talk to anyone, especially Julian, especially Mom. I found something. I think she's been doing this longer than we ever knew. I didn't even realize how paranoid I sounded until I hung up and looked in the mirror. But something inside me whispered I wasn't wrong. Because when I stopped at a gas station an hour later, I noticed a car parked 2 rows behind mine. Black sedan, no plates. Same one I'd seen outside my house the day before I found the folder. And when I looked again, it was gone. I didn't go to work the next day. I didn't call in either. I left my phone off, stuffed under the seat of my truck, along with the tapes and the red folder wrapped in an old hoodie I hadn't washed in weeks. I drove north. I don't know what pushed me in that direction. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way my brain was scrambling itself into knots, trying to answer questions I'd never even thought to ask. But deep down, something had clicked into place the moment I heard the word cabin on that tape. A rotten memory I couldn't quite unwrap, like a dream you only remember when you smell something familiar. I couldn't remember the address. I didn't even know if we'd ever had one. But I remembered a dirt road, a wooden gate with a half-broken lock, a rusted-out bathtub in the weeds. It sounded ridiculous, but I remembered it viscerally, and that was enough. I found it just after noon, 2 hours outside of Bend, hidden behind a string of logging trails and a collapsed wire fence. The gate was gone now, just leaning on its side, like someone had tried to pretend it never existed. But the path still curled through the trees like a spine, and I followed it, heart in my throat. When I finally saw the roof, I nearly turned around. It wasn't just real. It was exactly how I remembered it, except smaller. As a kid, everything had seemed enormous. But now, the structure looked like it could fold in on itself with one good storm. The paint was peeling, the windows were boarded, and a yellow plastic chair sat overturned on the porch, like someone left in a hurry and never came back. I didn't knock. There was no one to knock for. The door wasn't locked, and when I pushed it open, a rush of cold, stale air poured out, like the house itself had been holding its breath. Inside, the cabin was still. Dust floated in lazy beams of sunlight. A wooden table with one leg shorter than the rest. A fireplace choked with ash. And there, nailed to the far wall, was something I hadn't expected at all. A bulletin board with photos of me, dozens of them, some recent, some ancient, a few from my college years, a blurry one from my wedding where Evelyn and I were cutting the cake, one from last winter outside my office. My head turned slightly as if I'd sensed the camera. My stomach dropped. These weren't pulled off social media. They were taken in person, quietly over years, carefully arranged in sequence, like some kind of sick documentary. Next to the photos were yellowing papers, mostly redacted medical records, handwritten notes. One said, "Unstable, observe only, do not engage." Another simply said, "Oblivious," underlined 3 times. I staggered back. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys. The crash echoed like gunfire. I picked them up quickly and turned, ready to run, when I saw a name scratched into the wall by the door. It had been carved there with something sharp, jagged, violent. Sparrow. No last name, just that, all caps, letters uneven, like they were written by someone in a rush or someone very young. And underneath that, in fainter ink, a second word, "He's watching." I backed out of that place like it might bite me. I didn't care if it was trespassing. I didn't care if someone saw me. I sprinted to my truck and locked the doors. The air inside felt safer, but not by much. I sat there gripping the wheel, the word Sparrow bouncing around my skull like a loose screw. Was that S? The same S Liam had mentioned? Was that the man in the photo? The one with his hand on my son's shoulder like he owned him? And then it hit me. A detail I hadn't noticed until now. One of the photos on the board, one of me, wasn't from a public place. It was from inside my house, from the hallway. You could tell by the wallpaper, by the angle, which meant someone had been inside, while I was home, maybe while I slept. And suddenly, everything snapped into focus. This wasn't about Evelyn. This wasn't about Julian. This went deeper. Because if someone had been inside my house, then they had access to everything, to me, and maybe even to Liam. I drove for hours after that, not thinking, just fleeing. At some point, I stopped at a motel. I checked in under a fake name, paid cash. I didn't trust credit cards, didn't trust phones. I brought the tapes in the folder into the room and locked the door, with the chair under the handle, like I was in some bad spy movie. But I wasn't playing anymore. I wasn't spiraling. I was starting to see. At 2 in the morning, I called Evelyn again. She finally answered. I didn't waste time. I told her about the cabin, the board, the photos. I could hear her breathing on the other end, sharp, shallow, panicked. Then she whispered, "Oh God, I thought it was just me. I thought I was the only one he followed." My voice cracked. "Who is he, Evelyn? Who the hell is Sparrow?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I'll never forget, not for as long as I live. "He used to be your caseworker when you were little." I froze. "What caseworker?" She swallowed. "Before I met you. Before you were adopted by your mom. You don't remember it, but Daniel, I think Liam found him. I think he tracked him down. And now he's trying to finish what he started." I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. I sat in the dark motel room with static ringing in my ears and the single terrifying realization that nothing in my life, not even my name, might be what I thought it was. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat on the edge of the motel bed with the lights off, the folder open, the tapes lined up on the dresser like trophies from a life I didn't remember living. Evelyn's voice replayed in my head on an endless loop. "He used to be your caseworker before your mom adopted you." I couldn't even process that sentence. What caseworker? What adoption? My mother, Helen Reed, wasn't perfect, but she'd raised me, hadn't she? She was there through school plays and busted knees and tax seasons and breakups. But now that I thought about it, she never mentioned my early years, never told stories about my birth. No hospital photos, no baby books. I had always assumed she was just private, that she didn't have the time or maybe the resources. But what if that wasn't the reason? And what if Liam had found the man who had once controlled my story, and that's why he vanished? Around 5 a.m., I packed my things and drove straight to the county records office in Lane County. I knew I wouldn't be able to access sealed adoption files, but I figured if someone left a trail, I could at least smell the smoke. The clerk at the counter was tired, underpaid, and barely looked at me when I asked for anything under the name Daniel Joseph Reed prior to 1993. She typed lazily, sipped from a cup that said, "Don't ask me before coffee," and then suddenly froze. Her eyes narrowed. "There's a partial," she said, "just a note. No full file, but it's flagged as sensitive." I asked what that meant. She leaned in slightly and whispered, "Sometimes it means juvenile case transfer. Sometimes it means redacted guardianship." She couldn't print it, but she showed me the screen for 3 seconds. That's all I needed. The entry was dated April 12, 1989. The name listed under custodial authority, S.K. Sparrow. The same name from the cabin wall, from the folder, from Liam's messages. And suddenly, it all made sense. Too much sense. Sparrow had worked with children, with me, and apparently with others. I left that building so fast I forgot to close my jacket. I called Evelyn while pacing in the parking lot, and she answered before the second ring. "He's real," I said breathlessly. "Sparrow, he was my caseworker, my guardian. He was involved in something, Evelyn, and if Liam found him, I think he's in more danger than we thought." But Evelyn didn't speak right away. Then she said slowly, "Daniel, I don't think he found Sparrow. I think Sparrow found him." Those words snapped something in my spine. "Why would he target him now?" I asked, "after all this time?" She was crying now, just slightly, but I could hear it behind her voice. "Because Liam is the same age you were when you disappeared." I blanked. "What are you talking about?" But she didn't answer. The line clicked dead. I tried calling her back, but it went straight to voicemail. I panicked. I slammed the gas pedal so hard I peeled rubber, leaving the lot. I didn't know where she was. I didn't know who else she might have told. But I had one last shot in the dark. Something I hadn't told her yet. Something I hadn't told anyone. 2 days before I found the red folder, I saw someone outside my house. A boy. Not a man. Not Sparrow. A boy. Thin, hooded, standing half in the streetlight's glow. I'd assumed it was some neighborhood kid cutting through. But now I wasn't so sure. because the shape of him, the slight stoop in the shoulders, the way he turned his face like he was ashamed, it felt familiar. I didn't mention it at the time because I thought I was being paranoid. But what if it wasn't paranoia? What if Liam had come to find me before he disappeared? What if he'd already tried to reach me? I raced back home. Every mile stretched like elastic. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, sweat gathering at the back of my neck. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the sun was already climbing over the rooftops. And that's when I saw it. A figure in my front yard, small, slouched, a boy standing just behind the hydrangeas, staring at my front door. I stopped the truck so hard it skidded sideways. I threw open the door, heart pounding so loud it drowned everything out. "Liam," I shouted, "is that you?" He looked at me, but only for a second, a single wide-eyed glance. Then he turned and ran, not away from me, around the house, toward the woods, toward the path behind the fence we used to call the back way when Evelyn and I lived here. I chased him. Branches scraped my arms. I nearly fell 3 times, but I kept running, yelling, begging, "Liam, please, it's me. I'm your father." He stopped only once, just long enough for me to see his face in full light. It was him, older than I expected, thinner, pale, eyes haunted, but still my son. And in his hands he held something, a VHS tape. He dropped it on the ground and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he vanished into the trees like smoke. I searched for hours, called his name. Nothing, but the tape remained. Dirty, cracked, unlabeled. I brought it home, hand shaking, and fed it into my old player. The screen buzzed, flickered, and there, in grainy footage, was a room I'd never seen before. White walls, no windows, a bed bolted to the floor, and me, not recently, as a child, tied to the bed, screaming. I didn't move for what felt like an eternity. The image on the screen, me bound to that cold bed, no windows, no warmth, was more than a memory. It was a betrayal that went deeper than words. My voice, young and afraid, echoed through the motel room as the tape played out in stuttering static. I watched myself cry, watched myself beg someone off camera to please stop telling me I'm not real. I didn't know what it meant, not completely. But I knew that man, the one who stood in the shadows of that footage, tall, still, face never shown, was Sparrow. And if he'd done this to me back then and found a way to bury it, to erase it, then Liam had every reason to fear him now. But Liam had done something I never could. He didn't run from the truth. He chased it. He found me. He left that tape. And that meant one thing I hadn't dared to believe until now. He still wanted me to find him, to help him, to show up in a way no one had ever done for me. So I did. I started with what I knew, the woods, the paths he'd taken. I retraced every step from that morning. I followed his trail, not like a hunter, but like a father trying to deserve the title. And eventually, after hours of silence, I found a clue. A piece of notebook paper nailed to a tree deep in the forest. It read, "Don't trust the one who smiles when you cry." It was a message, a warning, but also a breadcrumb. 2 days later, after running through dead ends, I found the house. It was on the outskirts of a forgotten stretch of road, half hidden behind a collapsed barn. Inside was nothing at first, but in the basement I found a locked room, a security panel. I don't know what overtook me. Adrenaline, rage, instinct, but I got it open. I broke in, and there he was. Liam, alive, thin, afraid, but alive. When he saw me, he didn't run. He didn't scream. He just stared, like he was trying to decide if I was a memory or a mirage. I said the only words that mattered. "I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again." He broke down. I held him. We didn't need DNA tests. We didn't need apologies or timelines. We just needed that moment, that connection, that truth. We called Evelyn from the road. She cried when she heard his voice. She told him over and over how proud she was. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed in second chances. Sparrow was gone, vanished, but I didn't care anymore. The real enemy had never been a man hiding in the shadows. It had been silence. It had been shame. And Liam shattered both by coming to find me. It took months, years, even therapy, trust, relearning what fatherhood could look like. But we got there slowly. Liam lives with me now. He draws maps again, some real, some imaginary. Sometimes I catch him staring at the trees outside the window like he's still listening for echoes. But he's safe, and he knows it. And me, I finally got to be something no one let me be before. A father who stayed.